Well, part two of my video here tonight, if you're still with me. If you tuned out, well, I'm not talking to you. So, as everyone knows, what happened in the Soviet Union and throughout Eastern Europe during the post-war period was basically systematic brutality, the widespread atrocities, the ruthless suppression of independent thought. And this has been fully documented and verified. But my contention here is, and this is Harold Pinter talking here, I'm reading from Harold Pinter's writings. But my contention here is that the United States crimes in that same period have only been superficially recorded, let alone documented, let alone acknowledged, let alone recognized as crimes at all. I believe this must be addressed and that the truth has considerable bearing on where the world stands now. Direct invasion of a sovereign state has never been, in fact, the favorite method of America's foreign policy. In the main, it has preferred what is described as low-intensity conflict. Low-intensity conflict means that thousands of people die, but slower than if you dropped some bombs on them in one fell swoop. It means that you infect the heart of the country, that you establish a malignant growth and watch the gangrene bloom. When the populace has been subdued or beaten to death, the same thing, and your own friends and the military and the great corporations sit comfortably in power, you go before the camera and say, democracy has prevailed. This was a commonplace thing in U.S. foreign policy in the years to which I refer. Innocent people, indeed, always suffer. Amongst countless low-intensity conflicts, the United States supported the brutal Somoza regime and dictatorship in Nicaragua for over 40 years. The Nicaraguan people, led by the Sandinistas, overthrew this regime in 1979 actually. A breathtaking popular revolution. The Sandinistas were imperfect. They possessed their fair share of arrogance, brutality, and their political philosophy contained a number of contradictory elements. But they were intelligent, rational, and civilized. They set out to establish a stable, decent, pluralistic society. The death penalty was abolished. Hundreds of thousands of poverty-stricken peasants were brought back from the dead. Over 100,000 families were given title to some land. 2,000 schools were built. A quite remarkable literacy campaign reduced illiteracy in the country to less than 1/7. Free education was established and a free health service. Infant mortality was reduced by 1/3. Polio was eradicated. The United States denounced these achievements as Marxist/Leninist subversion. In the view of the United States government, a dangerous example was being set in the context of the Cold War, of course. If Nicaragua was allowed to establish basic norms of social and economic justice, if it was allowed to raise the standards of healthcare and education and achieve social unity and national self-respect, neighboring countries would ask the same questions and do the same things. And they do. And they do to this day. And so do we, American citizens. The totalitarian dungeons were actually next door in Salvador and Guatemala. The United States had brought down the democratically elected government of Guatemala in 1954. And it is estimated that over 200,000 people had been victims of successive military dictatorships. 6 of the most distinguished Jesuits in the world were viciously murdered in the Central American University in San Salvador in 1989 by a battalion of Octatlel Regiment trained in Fort Benning, Georgia. That's in the United States. That extremely brave man, Archbishop Romero, was assassinated while saying Mass. It's estimated that probably 75,000 people died just in that one country alone. Why were they killed? That belief immediately qualified them as communists. They died because they dared to question the status quo, the endless plateau of poverty, disease, degradation, and oppression which had been their birthright. The United States fully brought down the Sandinista government. It took some years and considerable resistance, but relentless economic persecution and 30,000 more dead finally undermined the spirit of the Nicaraguan people. I may want to ask you at this point, what's your spirit? They were exhausted and poverty-stricken once again. The casinos moved back into the country. Free healthcare and free education were over. Big business returned with a vengeance. Democracy had prevailed. Shall I go on with part 3?